In 2024, the war in Ukraine may be halted, reports the publication Welt. This year, Ukraine is threatened with transitioning into a defensive position. If Western partners do not begin to provide more weapons to Kyiv by September, a critical moment may occur, writes the German newspaper Die Welt. Key points. Both sides lack a clear advantage, making a swift end to the conflict and the conclusion of peace agreement unlikely. Ukraine's chances of regaining lost territory this year are insignificant. It is likely that Kyiv will have to focus on holding their front line. Russia is attempting to break through Ukrainians' first line of defense in 18 locations, as was the case near Avdiivka. The West has underestimated Russia's military capabilities. Moscow has sufficient resources. Now the questions arise, will this conflict continue for years? Most likely not. On the contrary, there are many reasons to believe that it will be frozen already this year, the material says. Hey, my name is Alex, and this is a quick update on the Russian-Ukrainian war from the perspective of someone living within it. While newspapers publish various opinions, the war proceeds on its own. Overall, the situation across the country is as follows. The Russians may attempt to continue targeting terror with an emphasis on Kyiv. They have accumulated several dozen long-range missiles of the second type in Crimea, said Natalia Gumenyuk, spokesperson for the Operational Command South. Ukraine is still assessing the damages inflicted on the energy sector by a recent missile attack from Russia. As for now, main Ukraine energy companies have lost 50% of its generating capacity, and they are currently non-operational. Scheduled power outages are in effect in many cities. The damage are very serious. Energy workers are working on restoration, which may take months or even longer. The situation in the north of the country looks as follows. Russians systematically shell border towns and villages with everything they can get their hands on. Today the city of Kharkiv was hit, with 2 aviation bombs landing. There is damage to residential buildings recorded. But also the Russian city of Belgorod, which is not far from Kharkiv, is facing its own troubles. At least the residents of Belgorod are no longer as pleased with Putin's initiative of the war as they were at the beginning. This is what the launch of the Ukrainian kamikaze drone LFK looks like as it directed towards the Belgorod region, presumably targeting the power substation. The drone flies for 100 kilometers and has a warhead weighing 2.5 kgs. The Siversky sector. Fighters of the 95th Brigade have demonstrated the results of their work against Russians who are advancing towards the village of Terny. Currently, the village of Terny exists only on map, as the Russians have essentially leveled it to the ground and continue shelling it, as their attempt to take the settlement by storm are thwarted by the defense forces. The enemy is reinforcing, deploying various forces and means of fire to advance, aiming to displace Ukrainian forces from the foothold near the river Zaribets with further advancement towards Liman. However, our military prevents this by destroying the Russians. As exemplified by this video, the situation remains difficult. The same sector, a different area, and another comment on the situation from another soldier. For some time now, there has been an accumulation of Russian equipment and personnel in the Siversky sector. They are constantly conducting aerial reconnaissance and reconnaissance by combat, trying to discover something. Most likely, they will try to seize as much territory as possible before the US adopt a package of aid. I don't like to make predictions, said a soldier, but if the situation in the US remains relatively stable as it is now, then the package will likely be adopted by April. And here is another comment on the situation regarding Bilogorivka, still the same direction, from a Ukrainian Armed Forces officer fighting in that area. Bilogorivka is incredibly tough. The aviation has quieted down, but the enemy's reconnaissance and surveillance drones are dismantling our positions. Today there were 20 drones flights over one position, completely destroying it. The day before, yesterday, nearly 40 drone flights destroyed another position. They simply flew directly over our electronic warfare systems. Also, in the past 4 days alone, they have fired probably over 1082mm mortar rounds. They don't shell our position, only our movements. They are using rapiers, a couple of 82mm mortars, a couple of Vasilki mortars, and a couple of 120mm mortars. The terrain is complex, so the mortars are just what they need here. Furthermore, the Ukrainian warriors remind the Russians who the master is on Ukrainian soil. The aerial reconnaissance unit Khartia, using a drone, installed the Ukrainian flag on a high-voltage line pylon above Russian position in the same direction, essentially behind enemy lines. And this is the captured Russian articulated tracked all-terrain vehicle DT-30 Vitis, which is currently being used by the defense forces. It was likely seized early in the large-scale invasion, somewhere in this area, Kharkiv-Svatovo area. Bakhmut direction. The situation in Ivanovsky. On March 23rd, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced the taking of control over the village of Ivanovsky on the Bakhmut direction. This information absolutely and completely does not correspond to reality. However, this information was not intended for Russian citizens and certainly not for ours, but exclusively for Russian fighters who on the 23rd, 24th and 25th of March were sent to the western part of the village, after showing the statement of the Russian Ministry of Defense about full control over Ivanovsky. Naturally, Russian fighters not only failed to reach the western part of the village, they didn't even manage to enter the central part, as the Ukrainian Armed Forces inflicted fire damage on them along Shiroka Street and Artyom Alley in the eastern part of Ivanovsky. Mistakes of the Russian command allowed the Ukrainian Armed Forces to inflict significant damage to the enemy's personnel, which, suffering serious losses, significantly reduced the number of attacks in Ivanovsky. Avdiivsky sector. The enemy attacked the northern part of Berdychev with motorized infantry units supported by armored vehicles. The enemy's advance depth in up to 600 meters, reported by a soldier of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Meanwhile, Maxim Zhorin, deputy commander of the 3rd Separate Guards Mechanized Brigade, reports the following. At the moment, we have managed to slightly reduce the intensity of enemy offensive action on the Avdiivka front. They cannot advance with the wide front here. They are forced to localize their attack, but this does not mean that the Russians have stopped their attempt to advance. Moreover, if we have long been accustomed to the fact that they disregard personnel losses, now they don't care about equipment losses either. Every day a crazy amount of both infantry and equipment is destroyed, but this does not significantly affect the enemy's plans. And also an assessment of a situation by another serviceman. On the Avdiivka front, the situation seems to have stabilized, and we have even made a little progress. The Russians are not particularly active in terms of storming our positions anymore. This week we slightly improved our position by about 500 meters as far as I know. Overall it is stable. It could have been worse. Tavria sector. Fighters of the 36th Brigade have shown footage where they spectacularly leveled the headquarters of the Russians in the settlement of Lyubimivka on the left bank of the Kherson region on March 23rd. The strike was carried out with 2 JDAM bombs. Meanwhile, for 33 days, the A-50 AWACS Russian aircraft has not been conducting radar reconnaissance near Ukraine. Apparently, it won't be doing so anytime soon. However, this hasn't stopped the Russians, as they still need to scan the skies somehow. And for this purpose, they have started using the old Soviet Su-24MR, with questionable functionality, to be honest. Thanks to satellite imagery, inversion traces of this aircraft can be noticed near Yeysk. Based on public and non-public data, it can be conducted that the Su-24MR radar scans an area of approximately plus-minus 200 kilometers, which is at least twice smaller than that of the A-50. The A-50 scanned up to 400-600 kilometers depending on the target. The unreliability of Russian weapons and ammunition has been discussed repeatedly. Much of it fails to function properly. However, they rely on quantity, so downplaying the threat is not necessary. Here, a powerful aviation bomb fell near the position of the guys from the Ukrainian Armed Forces and didn't detonate. The bomb fell right next to us, just 10 meters away. It was terrifying, and here is our dugout. Here is an example of the work of Western weaponry, the HIMARS system. Malfunctions also occur with Western weaponry, but much less frequently than with Russian weaponry. And in terms of accuracy, it significantly surpasses it. And next, I would like to show you a post from Russian soldiers where they complain about the Russian army. Some Zerd assault fighters from the Kaluga region claim that they were deceived about their salaries, were not provided with combat IDs and were ignored everywhere. Out of 230 of us, only 38 remain alive. We have payment issue as per the 98th order. Meanwhile, in Russia itself, a tank collided with a passenger car in Nizhny Tagil. The accident occurred on March 26 near the exit from the territory of Uralvagonzavod plant. Times change and so do accidents. And as for the situation with ammunition in Ukraine, it seems to be improving. Thus, Slovenia has joined the Czech initiative to provide 1.5 million rounds of ammunition to Ukraine, and Poland has decided to double its contribution. Meanwhile, according to Bloomberg report, Turkey will provide TNT to the United States for ammunition for Ukraine. Turkish supplies of trinitrotoluene and nitroglycerin, which are used as propellant, will be crucial for the production of 155th caliber ammunition meeting NATO standards. According to officials familiar with the course of the negotiations, this will triple ammunition production. In Ukraine itself, the situation is also progressing. For instance, a private mortar factory established in the western part of the country last year now produced around 20,000 shells per month. Meanwhile, in Poland, a coalition for armored vehicles for Ukraine has been launched. The first meeting of the representatives of the participant countries took place in Warsaw. This initiative was proposed by Poland and Germany, later supported by the United Kingdom, Sweden and Italy, as reported by the Ministry of Defense. The goal of the Armored Vehicle Coalition is to strengthen the armored shield of the Ukrainian Armed Forces and jointly enhance Ukrainian military capabilities in countering Russian aggression. Meanwhile, the United Nations has confirmed 7 cases of executions of Ukrainian prisoners of war committed by Russians from December 2023 to February 2024. The killing of unarmed prisoners of war is a serious violation of the Geneva Convention. It is classified as a grave international crime. Those responsible for committing them must face fair punishment. And that wraps up today's video. If you found this information helpful or somehow insightful, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.